or the main topic today is, let's see, I can't get the shift here. So okay. Today's topic is the principle of liking, and you have been talking about Cialdini's different principles, and I am going today to talk about the principle of the liking, and we have seen that this principle is quite strong, and it's also by several research been shown that we are influenced and persuaded by someone that we feel sympathy for, to a higher degree for those who we don't feel sympathy for, and we often feel sympathy for those who we know. For example, such as friends and peers and our family, for example. We are more easily influenced and persuaded by those people compared to strangers, for example. That's quite obvious. But there are several factors that can influence people to like some other people more than others. And Cialdini also notes that this liking rule is a principle. This principle is used by professionals to is exploded in many ways. We use this principle in businesses.
Can I just jump in here?
Yes.
And just to say to you attending this webinar that as previous times, you're free to interrupt and ask questions during Pernille's presentation.
Yes, of course.
By the microphone or through the chat function.
Yeah.
And I hope that we'll have some more attending here coming in soon, but we will continue with this and people have the option to view the recordings of it afterwards.
Yeah.
And you're most welcome, Vadim.
Me? Who were you talking to, Lars? I can see your lips moving, but you have mute yourself.
My mic. And here's Michael as well. Welcome.
Yeah, I saw Michael with us.
Sorry about that. Sorry about that.
Okay.
You don't have to be visible. I'm going to shut my video as well, so I will listen to it.
Okay.
So, Pernille, please take it forward.
Yeah, thank you. And of course, welcome Michael and Lars. Okay, this liking principle, we have seen that the businesses have used this principle or strategy to influence customers. But first we're going to look at why we actually like each other. And I know that you have Tobias have talked about the physical attractiveness, and this is one way of actually influence other people, or I should say it like this. We have seen in research that we are more influenced by physical attractive people compared to those who are not so attractive. And we tend to like those people more that are physically attractive. And that's why we have commercials with attractive people or movie stars and so on. But we also like people more because they are giving positive comments to us, for example, flattery. We are suckers to flattery, and we tend to like those people more that give us positive comments. And we also have a tendency to like people more because of similarity. For example, if I have the same gender or age or interest or music style or fashion style and so on and so on, we tend to like those people more that we feel that we are similar to, compared to those who are not so similar to us. And this similarity, oh, I hear some strange noise. Okay, welcome, Sanna. Maybe it was your noise, strange noise that I heard. Exactly, similarity. We tend to like people more if we feel that we are connected or we have something in similar with them. And we also tend to like people more if they self-disclose personal information about them. And you can use self-disclosure to try to get the feeling of similarity. But we are going to focus on the self-disclosure aspect of this. Why do we like other people? And a theory about this self-disclosure and liking connection is illustrated in this model. And Collins and Miller have actually did a meta-analytic review about this self-disclosing phenomenon. And they say, and several studies say, that self-disclosing personal information about yourself almost always leads to that the other person likes you more because of this. And the thing about self-disclosure...
We have a question there, Pernille.
Yeah.
Could you give an example of the self-disclosure, what you mean, so I can understand?
Okay, yeah, of course. If I meet someone and I'm starting to talk, I want a relationship with this person. It could be a stranger or a friend or whoever. If I self-disclose personal information about myself, there could be information about what kind of music I like, or what food I prefer, or where I have been on vacation. I reveal something personal about myself to the other person.
Do people like me more if I self-disclose more personal information about myself, my preferences and relationships? Is there a limit where this backfires when I get too personal or too much self-disclosure?
You're actually going very forward to this, but actually it depends on how the relationship, the duration of the relationship. For example, if you meet a stranger, you may be knowing this by yourself, that you are not disclosing really private stuff at the first time, but you give a little bit of yourself, for example, to a stranger or a new acquaintance. Depending on the length of the relationship is also due to how much information and how private the information is. So, but we have seen in research that giving personal information about yourself facilitates the liking of that person, comparing to those who doesn't reveal personal information about themselves. So, for example, John discloses to Mary something personal, and this effect is that Mary likes John more than she would have done if we compare it to Peter, who doesn't disclose personal information to Mary. And this is a loop. And because Mary likes John because he had disclosed personal information about himself, she is going to replicate and also tell something personal about herself. And then John likes Mary, and so on. Is that enough description for you, Michael? Okay, fine. But this is a theory of self-disclosing and liking, and why the liking is connected to self-disclosure. And we have seen this effect and that theory in, for example, when you are building new relationships, for example, a new student relationship, or friendship, making a friendship with a new person, or in how do you say it in English? If you're planning to meet a new partner, for example. Let's go on. Okay. And the theory also says that being personal by disclosing personal information may be an important strategy for development and maintenance of consumer-employee relationships. And research has demonstrated that self-disclosure, that is communicating personal information to another party, is experienced as making friendly advances. So, if we see some real comments from actual people, we can see this quotation by Fredrik Eklund. Maybe you know who he is. He's a very famous real estate marketing. He sells real estates anyway. He said in a podcast that I listened to, I don't want the customer to see me as a salesperson. Rather, they should see me as a friend. And see me as a friend involves being personal in the relationship, disclosing personal information. And Lourdes Marta Rosa said in a podcast or in a workshop that make it personal, reveal something about yourself, and you are more likely to make a purchase from that salesperson and feel good about it. So it's quite common that we think that if I can get friends with my customers, I can get advantages. And they should like me more. And from these quotes, the idea that friendship leads to favorable returns is becoming more and more increasingly widespread in businesses. Cultivating friendship as a business strategy is actually not a new thing to marketing. And friendship may be, for example, used to increase feelings of doing something in return. And I know that you maybe have been looking at Cialdini's reciprocity principle. And this is also, if I give something to you as personal information, we have the tendency to feel that, okay, I have to return something. And most often this returning something is sometimes disclosing something by myself, or in business context, I buy something instead from you, the reciprocity principle. Okay, and research has shown that the central property of friendship, building friendship and building relationship, is actually self-disclosure. And it's something common that friends are almost always expected to share personal information with each other. Okay, let's move on. And this connected to businesses, where we have seen that the interaction between the consumer and the service employer is one of the most important factor that influences perceived quality from the consumer's perspective and consumer satisfaction. And there are several studies that propose that employee is one of the most influential factor for a service company. And Sommerdick and Voss argue that one way to influence consumer emotions and engage them is through the service employee. And they stated that the interaction between the consumer and the service employer is actually one of the most important factors for the perceived quality and consumer satisfaction experience. And this leads us to my first discussion with you. I want to ask you if you have met a salesperson, for example, if you have bought a product or you have bought a service. Has this salesperson being personal? Have they told you personal things? And my other question is, are you currently working or have you been working as a salesperson? And if you had so, did you tell personal things to the consumer? So that's my question to you.
Please feel free to comment.
Yeah.
Or respond. Vadim?
May I start, please? Yeah.
Oh, welcome.
Yeah, thank you. I would start to answer the first question about any salesperson who told me personal things. And one example is a lady from the coffee shop nearby from my office. Usually in the morning and on every business day, usually I come to her and we discuss and speak on a lot of things. And I totally agree with you because my satisfaction from that coffee shop is very high, and having a choice of going there or to another place, I will definitely choose the coffee shop where I have some personal relationships with a lady.
Yeah. So. And can I ask you, Vadim, sorry, if you can remember the first time you bought coffee from that woman, was she personal in the first encounter with you? Or
Definitely.
did it come? Definitely.
Definitely.
Okay.
Yes, because she was the person who started our conversation. And we discussed something like weather or something like that.
Okay.
And later we moved on personal things. She discussed and she told something about her. I answered and told her about me. And so we began our conversation.
Okay. Okay. So, okay. Good. Good.
Yeah. I may also answer the second question because I often work as a salesperson. This is not my direct responsibilities, but I often work with the clients. And here I agree with you again that when you speak to the client some personal information, and he usually shares something personal with you, and you have, I wouldn't call this friendship or something like that, but you have some new connection between you and the client, and of course it's increased the trustworthiness of me in client's eyes. So I think so that it helps me to sell the service I want to sell him, but on the other hand, it makes me more responsible for the products and services I offer to this client. I try to do my best to offer this client the best I can do.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, the other ones? Yeah, Michael.
Yeah, I thank you very much for sharing, Vadim. I think on regards to the second question, usually when I'd say I'm selling sort of an idea. So I'm quite often working as sort of a salesperson for my organization, and what I've seen as successful is to ask people how they're doing, which is, in Swedish it's how are things, which is the first thing I ask a person, and depending on what that person says, they can say nice, the weather is nice, or they can say, oh, I've got the flu, oh, the kid's back home, and then we can both decide upon how personal we want to be on that specific encounter. And we also, I find that it gives people a chance to breathe, to come into the conversation where they want to be. It's not business from right on, so you can actually relax a bit, and then you can do business. So it helps us to and also see more junior colleagues who don't do that. They often get into the offer too quickly.
Okay.
And they don't close the deal.
No, because they don't build a relationship. This is a way to building a relationship. Can I ask you, what is the duration of the relationship with your customers? Are you supposed to be a longer relationship, or is it a one-time encounter?
No, almost everyone that I meet is longer relationships and are meant to last for quite some time.
For a longer time.
Yeah.
And can I ask, Vadim, how are your, if you worked as a salesperson, how are the duration to your customers? Is it a long-term or is it a one-time encounter?
Honestly, I work in personal finance and asset management. And of course, the longer I have relationships, the better for me and for my business. So I'm interested in building relationships, and I want these relationships to be long term.
Yeah, but you want to have a longer relationship. It's not one time you meet them and they are gone.
Sure.
It's a longer relationship. Sure. Okay.
Yes.
Do we have another one who wants to tell us about their experience?
Sana, will you?
Okay.
Excuse me, may I please ask a question?
Yeah.
Yes. Where is the line between self-introduction, I would say, and the line where the consumer may feel that you are selfish and tell a lot of things about yourself?
Okay. Okay. That's
yes. I think that self-disclosure may backfire in some cases, because.
You mean that the customers are have a feeling that you are too focused,
yes.
selfish. Okay.
Yes, and explain too much about yourself, and maybe they are not that interested in your life, in the details that you would like to share with them.
Yeah.
And Pernille, I think this will perhaps be
discussed later on.
Later on in the presentation, where you present the.
Excuse me.
So, good point.
Good point. I've been thinking of that also.
Very good question. I was just thinking the same thing, Vadim, because I've met that a couple of times. Excellent question.
Thank you.
And that's actually very good question, Vadim, because that leads us to my study, my study that I want to talk to you about. Because when I heard this about friendship and self-disclosing, and actually having my own experience of meeting salespersons who was sometimes very personal in their approach to me, and hearing, for example, these things as Frederick and Lourdes talked about, this strategy. Talk about yourself, being friendly with your customers, and it's always going to lead to some positive outcomes. For example, the customer is going to buy more, and the customer is going to like you more, and the customer is going to be more satisfied. And I actually thought, is this really the case always? And that's why I did my study about self-disclosure in consumer context. And this article is the effect of frontline employees' personal self-disclosure on consumers' encounter experience. So I actually did two studies of this, and the purpose of the paper was to investigate if frontline employees' self-disclosure in one-time encounters, because I wanted to study only one-time encounters, because we have that in a lot of buying situations, that we only meet the frontline employee once and maybe never again. And I wanted to see if, because we have this self-disclosing liking theory in businesses, long-term relationships, they say it works. Okay, does it work in a one-time encounters? So that I wanted to see if that was the true. And I also wanted to see if frontline employees' self-disclosure in one-time encounters, if that influences consumers' reciprocal behavior. And the reciprocal behavior in this case was, does the consumer give positive word of mouth about an encounter experience? And do they want to return to this specific store and that employee. So that was the measurement of reciprocal behavior. And I also wanted to see if that reciprocal behavior was mediating, for example, going through the impression of the social impression of the employee. For example, the experience of the employee being competent, nice, friendly, and superficial, and so on. That was the social impression of the employee. And I also wanted to see if the reciprocal behavior was going through the satisfaction with the encounter. So I did 2 studies about this, where I looked at, built this model. Does self-disclosure go through liking the experience of the employee being competence or superficial? And then does this lead to satisfaction, and does this lead to reciprocal behavior? And then I actually did 2 experiments. One in a bank context, because I wanted to have both a service context and I also wanted a product, buying a product context. So I did the 2 experiments, one in a bank context and one in a sporting goods store context. And they are quite different. And I did, I should say that I did this with a text-based scenario where the participants were to read a text containing 2 scenarios for the bank context and 2 scenarios for the sporting goods context, where they read that the employee, frontline employee, either were self-disclosing personal information in this in the context or not. And then we measured these other things. And we had about 369 participants in experiment 1 and about 100 in experiment 2. So we tested this. Does it work? And before I move on, I want you to think of the results. Do you have any idea about the outcome of these 2 studies?
Well, I believe that in both cases, that self-disclosure increase reciprocation from customer and makes them leave the satisfied. I'm sorry.
Okay. Yes. Anyone else? No? Okay.
I would guess that as well.
You guess a positive outcome on reciprocal behavior and all that. Yeah. Okay. Good. That was my idea also when I started. But actually we discovered the opposite. We discovered that when a frontline employee discloses personal information, and beware, in a one-time encounter with a person that you never met before and you probably never going to meet again, when they disclose personal information, they are perceived as being less competent and more superficial, which in turn leads to a decrease encounter satisfaction and also lesser reciprocal responses.
Michael had a comment.
Yeah.
What kind of personal information do they disclose?
Yeah.
The examples.
Yeah. For example, in the bank, the participant read a story that they went to the bank because they wanted to open an account as a gift to their friend's newborn, because the newborn was going to baptize. So they wanted to open an account, saving account for that baby as a gift. And when they came to the bank, they asked about Chinese funds. Is that good, or is it, what should I put the money on in for the babies. And then the frontline employees started to talking about the Chinese fund and explain the different things and about that. And in the disclosing scenario, they also talked about the trip they did to China. A short sentence that they did a trip to China, and it was an amazing trip and stuff. So a short presentation of something personal, a trip to China, because they talked about the Chinese fund. And in the sport goods store, the scenario were that the person was going to buy running shoes, and they talked to the frontline employee and asked about different shoes, and they wanted some advice, which should I buy. And in the self-disclosing scenario, the frontline employee described different kinds of shoes, running shoes, but said that this shoe I picked myself. I have these shoes because, and they were really good when I went to Stockholm for the weekend, because they are very light. And when I have took these shoes to me with me to Stockholm, they were so light and they were not heavy for the baggage, and they were really good at when I walked around seeing the castle in Stockholm and stuff. So yeah. Yes.
I was thinking in the first example, what would have happened if the person in the counter would have talked about their grandchild or their girl or boy, who they also, and they would have given praisal for that person that they were saving. That would be sharing and also praising the other person, telling them that they've been to China. That is a different story for me.
Yeah, I understand your point, but the reason for us not picking on that some kind of similarity stuff, that I also gave my friends baptized baby a fund, saving fund, because we didn't want the effect to be due to similarity. Do you remember where I have here? The liking could also be due to similarity, and we wanted that. We didn't want that. We wanted the pure personal self-disclosure effect.
That would be flattery or similarity, but you're going for the self-disclosure.
But we are aware of maybe we could have had different results if we have chosen to do as you said. But we wanted to clean out other possibility that it wasn't this personal self-disclosing thing that affected the results. So that's why. But I understand it's a good question. Let's see, where were we? Yeah. Here I think we were here. Yeah, we discovered that it wasn't positive to self-disclose personal information in these two quite different contexts, where you have this that you are buying a service or you're buying a product. And then we have talked about this before. Adim was into this. I want to talk to you about if you think there are differences with my results in your mind. Do you think that differences due to the context or professions? Do you think that I would have had found the same results if I have looked at hairdressers who are self-disclosing? And also, does the duration of the relationship matter for the effects of self-disclosure? Yeah. And we have also talked about the depth, the quality of what we are revealing for the other one, and the quantity, how much of the disclosure. Does this matter? I want to hear your opinion of these things.
May I start, please?
Yes.
I will start from the answer on the first question.
Oh, you turned off the sound. You have to turn off. Vadim?
Vadim, we can't hear you. Vadim,
example with hairdressing.
Okay.
I hope, at least I hope that there is a difference. And when you have a conversation with a hairdresser, you may feel more satisfaction after you have received your service, or at least I hope so, because the results which you have shown us was for me counterintuitive. Yeah, I honestly was sure that we will see other results in your experiment.
Yeah,
so,
yeah. You are not the first, and we also were very actually surprised. So I missed quite a lot of your talk because you had turned off the sound. But
excuse me.
Yeah, but I have also been thinking of this. Is it the profession that makes it more appropriate to self-disclose personal information, or is it that we are actually the profession is actually very physical, close to the person they are serving?
I think the example of the hairdresser, before you showed me, I was actually thinking about the hairdresser and my experiences when I'm comfortable. I want to go back to a hairdresser, and I think that's a very difficult profession to have, because to find that line between being personal but not private and not repeating yourself. The first time I go to a hairdresser, I want it to be in a certain way, whatever way I want it to be. And I want it to be somewhat personal, because they are touching me.
Yeah.
They are doing things to my body. But if I come back the second time and it's a complete exact repeat of the first time, then it's a sales pitch. Yeah. And then I'm not. And then they're actually not self-disclosing. They're actually cheating me to believe that they are self-disclosing, and that does not work for me.
Well, I think we are quite good at detecting this. Is this a pitch or is it the real thing? So it's a balance you have to be aware of. Yeah.
And sometimes also for me personally, I also very much enjoy high integrity.
Yeah.
So I appreciate very much if people don't self-disclose too soon or too much. But when they do, I feel that I've been let into their world, and it's sort of something I've been given that I need to cherish. And that's the sort of relationships I want to have around me. Even when I go down to my local supermarket, I want that relationship as well. Not too much, but just a wee bit.
Yeah, I understand. Okay, someone else have a reflection or something they want to talk about? Okay, maybe I can also talk to you about Vadim. I didn't ask the question, but I asked if the duration of the relationship you had with the coffee woman. We also did in the study where we let a third scenario where we let the participant disclose back to the frontline employee to see if that affect the outcome. But what we saw was it doesn't affect the outcome. It doesn't get more positive if we as a customer self-disclose back as a reciprocal behavior. And that was quite interesting. But I also want to talk to you about, what if it is the customer who discloses personal information first? Could we had another result then?
Excuse me, please. I've missed your question. Could you please
ask
again?
My question were, if it is the customer who is the first person to self-disclose personal information, if we had set the scenario in that way, do you think that the results have been different?
Different for whom? For employee or for customer?
For the customer. For example, if I as a customer come to the bank or the store, and I ask about
something.
I tell I'm the first person who tells something personal to the salesperson, and then they self-disclose and it go back and forward, and then I buy my shoes. Do you think that?
I think that this matter, because I've read a lot in business books that people think of their counterparties as a very interesting counterparty, and in cases when you when I speak and you listen, I feel that you are a very good counterparty, and I thought that I had a very interesting conversation with you. So even in the case when it was my only my speech, and I didn't get any answers from you, I anyway feel that you were a very good counterparty for me in this speech. So I hope at least that in your study it was proved.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
I would believe that as well, and I suppose my guess would be that if a customer were to self-disclose when they came into a shop or when they want to buy something, and the seller did not self-disclose, I would guess that would give a feeling of harshness.
Okay.
That almost may give the feeling of rudeness.
Yeah, okay.
It might not be good, my guess.
Yeah, but if the salesperson were giving self-disclosing back to the customer, do you think it had a more positive outcome than in my experiments?
In the same context, with a one.
Yeah, one encounter. But this time it's the customer who actually initiates.
Maybe not. If I wouldn't have heard the results from your previous study, I would say yes, but maybe not.
No, okay. It's something I have to do some experiments about, I think. Okay, nice. Let's see, how are we doing? Okay. We had a lot of time, not a lot of time, some time over, and I think we all already discussed the duration of the relationships and the depth and quantity, so on. But I have another question to you. It's about, I know that you have talked about and tweeted about the ethical aspects of this. And how do you think about, is it ethical appropriate to use, for example, if I use this as a strategy, being personal towards the customer in order to get some positive outcomes of it, is it ethical right to be that way? What's your opinion?
I think that it depends on information I share with my clients or customers, because I don't know, if I share something negative with them, or something maybe misleading, or something pursuing them to buy my service, it's not ethical. But if I just want to make a closer and more friendly relationships, so why not?
No, it's an open question. I have no answers about it, but I've been thinking about it a lot. So I want to hear your opinion about it. Someone else?
I'm not sure that it would be effective to do it all the time, because I think you lose customers if you're not real.
Yeah.
If you're not ethical, I think that's not a good business.
No, it's going to backfire. Yeah.
It's going to backfire anyways.
Okay. Yeah.
We discussed it in the previous tweet chat and webinar that where do we draw the line? And some of you suggested that, well, as long as we not deceive people, lie, because that will come through at the end if we have a longer relationship. So be honest. But if you disclose information and you're actually very similar to the person that you're disclosing to, then the question is what happens over time. Will they start to be liking, or will they think that you're trying to just get them to buy your stuff?
Yeah.
The woman in the coffee shop, if you share interests and she always tells you what you would like to hear.
Honestly, if, for example, I met that lady somewhere else in the city, not in her coffee shop, and decided to say her hi and make a small conversation with her, and if she refused, for example, to speak with me outside of coffee shop, of course I will feel that this is rude, and I will think that she was not. I don't know how to say. She
authentic.
Wasn't, yes.
Yeah.
During her work, and of course it wasn't not authentic. So, but if we keep our relationships, friendly relationship, outside of her coffee corner, so I think this might be okay. We mostly live in a big cities, and we have a lack of personal meetings and sharing information about each other. So this even might be good. Why not?
Yeah, and then we also have this question about in which society or country are we doing this research? I think it's different if you go from, for example, to America, and if we have done that this research there, maybe we had another outcome. I think the culture and so on could also affect these things, because it's not the same everywhere.
Honestly, I wanted to ask you this question, but I decided that it can be abusive for you to, if I comment that maybe this study works only in Sweden, for example, but maybe it won't work in other countries. So
exactly, and that we have to think of that when we are doing this kind of studies, and when we are telling, for example, retailers or other businesses that this is the truth. Okay, then you have to be aware of, okay, where did this study, where was it conducted, and are the differences depending on the culture? For example, I don't think that maybe this study could be more appropriate applied in Japan, for example, because they don't have they have almost the same culture, not talking about yourself kind of awareness, comparing to the United States, where you are supposed, if you work as a salesperson in the United States, you are supposed to be extremely friendly and attentive to the customer. It's quite different. So
yeah, and also in my personal experience, it might be dependent on the population of the city, because in large city people do not so close to each other as, for example, in a small city. towns or villages and so on.
Yeah, that's true. So this is my advice to you, is that when you read research or studies, you always have to think of, okay, what does it matter due to the profession, the businesses, the context, the ethical aspects, and the culture. Where are we operating? How does this work? Could I say to my colleagues in Japan that this study says that don't be personal in your relationship in one-time encounter with your customer? Could I say that? Because that's the thing. I'm just babbling now. So, but I hope you understand.
Going to your comment in the beginning when you presented your personal view about this first-time encounter and that you build a relationship depending and disclose your information, your personal information, in response to what the other are responding to the question. And that's where you have the sense of, and feels or try to feel where the person you meet, at what level that person is. In the context of this study, that people are not sensitive. They are just disclosing personal information, and then they are perceived as less of an expert. And you don't like that person in these kind of situations. But when you are sensitive and have these communicative skills, then you can start building something. And I think that in the coming modules of the course, you will talk more about communication as well. So this perspective will be highlighted even more and in depth later on. Yes, Michael.
So is there a skill set where you can, or is that where you can actually train upon certain skills? There are techniques of self-disclosing, but there are skill sets or social skills that you need to combine to be effective.
I don't have a perfect answer, but I think that's something that you can learn. I guess that we have different personalities. Some persons are more extrovert and some are more introvert. And
then the thing is, you never know when your customer is there for the first time, but you have to have some sort of feel for how deep should I go now, and that's not. That's just not me. There has to be certain guidelines, a certain.
I think one guideline that I think is, you could always be professional.
Yep.
And professional doesn't mean that you have to be self-disclosing personal stuff to get the customer to like you. They can like you just by being professional. And if you are just being professional, I think you gotta get more positive outcome from the customer. But then I also think that if the customer is seeking or giving you, I think another way, I think it's the customer that have to set the rules. So you can't never by in one time encounter be aware of or be so skilled that you are going to observe the customer to be an introvert or extrovert. That's quite difficult. But if you are professional and you let the customer be the one who takes the initiative. I can't say it in English. Be the one who guides or set the rules. Then I think you are a good professional salesperson. So, for example, if one customer starting with self-disclosing personal information, then maybe you can build that relationship on giving back personal stuff. But and still being professional. But if the customer doesn't give you a hint of the personal stuff, let it be. Just be professional. I think that's the key for actually knowing how to do it.
Do you want to say something, Azar? turn off on your mic.
Yeah, and no, I just a comment on culture. From my experience, I would actually emphasize, and I missed part of the discussion, the importance of culture. And from my experience, dealing Chinese, dealing with the British or American, is a totally different ballgame.
Yeah.
So as a general rule, I would say being open, as an open person is a prerequisite when you throw culture into this whole discussion.
Yeah.
So if you're not open, then and you throw culture into it, then we have issue. So being open, that was a comment.
Yeah, it's a good comment. But being open, do you mean being sincere about yourself, for example? Is that
being open mean more adaptive?
Yeah.
So
okay.
That's what I mean. Yes.
Yeah, I think it's a very good point, actually. So,
because in some cultures, I mean, I was following a discussion. Some cultures are more superficial, if I may. And in some cultures, they are more authentic. Again, this is all relevant where you are from.
Yeah.
A person, a customer, or a salesman would appear superficial US if they are selling a product or service to a Swede.
Okay.
And vice versa.
Yeah.
And so
exactly.
on.
I agree. The culture is very important, that we also think about that. And as you say, being open. And as I said before, let the customer set the rules, how the relationship and how the communication is going to be. I think that's the easiest way to...
May I have one comment, please?
Yes.
A few days ago, I have listened to one popular American podcast on behavioral science, and the topic was loneliness. And the main idea was that the people usually want to have a conversation with a stranger, but they're afraid of starting this conversation. And there was a study when people were asked if the people with whom they go to the train will be interested in having a conversation with them. And more than 50% told that probably no one would like to speak with them. But actually, almost 100% wanted to have a conversation with a stranger. So maybe I agree with you, but maybe in some cases, if you are working as a service employee, you might like to ask some questions to the customer, and maybe he would like to answer and share some personal information with you.
Yeah, you have many things here I want to say to you. The reason for us not to have this conversation with strangers, for example, in a bus or a train, is due to the norms that we have. We could actually want the conversations with strangers because it's rather nice to talk to people. But we have norms, rules, these unhidden rules that said that you are not supposed to discuss things with strangers if that is the cultural norm. But we can still have this urge to that we really want to do that. But the norm says you're not supposed to do that. You're only supposed to talk to people that you know. For example, in Sweden, we are not supposed to talk to anyone in buses.
An interesting addition here that I have done some studies on actually going by public transport together with Margareta Freeman from previous module. And we have looked at what people do during the travel. And we see that if those that actually have social interactions during their travel, they are more satisfied with the trip. which also leads to greater happiness in the end. So even though our norm is that we shouldn't talk, and we say that we want to be by ourselves during this, because it's our time and our space, actually those being social have greater outcomes. So I fully understand the outcome of the study that you mentioned. That people actually, they want to, but they do not do it.
Yeah. Because of the norms, and we want to be in a social context. We want to be seen and heard, and so. But I could tell you, a thing that I do with my students who is taking a course in social psychology, and I ask them to go out in the society and break the norms, break the rules. And I gave examples to the students so they get a grasp of what they can do. And I say to them, for example, break the rule of talking to the person sitting next to you in the bus. And in Sweden, we are not supposed to sit next to a person if there are free spaces then we can sit alone. That's the rule. And then the rule is, if you are sitting next to someone else, don't talk to that person. Especially not you can talk about the weather and stuff, that's ordinary things, but you can't talk to the other person and ask them, or saying, I read this great book, it's about this and this. Have you an example of a good book that you have read? Don't do that. That's breaking the rules. And I said to the students, you can try this to feel the power of these norms and rules. And then I had a student who raised her hand, and she said, I already done that. Okay, you have read psychology in high school. No, I did that when I was a new immigrant from Tanzania. Okay, and she said that in Tanzania, it's breaking the rule not to talk to the persons that are actually in the bus. And she took this culture, her norms, to Sweden and thought that, okay, this is how I've been doing, and she did it in Sweden, and she was, oh my God, leprechaun person, get away from here. So the norms are always, as we said before, the culture and the context is very important to be aware of.
I have been to Sweden, and I traveled around Sweden mostly by buses, and almost in every bus, intercity buses, and almost in every bus I spoke to the person whom I sit near. I asked them a question about the country, about the towns and the city I move in, and as I felt, no one thought that I was rude to them, and they were ready to keep this conversation, and I spoke to them.
But that's something different. Yeah, you are a tourist. That's okay for you to ask questions about Sweden.
and the thing about Swedes, they would never actually tell you. They'd never tell you. It's also a very cultural thing. So you learn to read it. You learn to it's again, it's very
it's an interesting thing, but I think we have gone a different path with this. But it's extremely interesting.
I see on the clock actually it has passed 1 o'clock, and I know that people are working, so perhaps need to go back, but the conversation could continue on your blogs. We can comment each other.
That would be nice.
And if you found any related papers or interesting stuff, use Twitter as we do. Next week we will not have any tweet chat or webinar. We have Easter holidays, so we will use the blog, and you will start writing and preparing for those of you who are taking the course credits, doing the assignments.
Yeah.
So, I would like to thank you, Pernille.
And I have a last slide. This is me saying goodbye to you. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and hopefully we see each other again somewhere, sometime.
Thank you very much for a very interesting presentation and very good conversation. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, guys. Have a good weekend.
Yeah, the same.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.